Hey everyone. Hey there. Sorry about that. I was trying to use my iPad. Hey there. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear my voice? Hey. Good. All right, sorry. I was trying to be fancy and use my iPad so I'd be able to read the comments. So I'm back to my iPhone, but that's okay. Hello. Let me introduce myself. I am Laura Silberman. I have been working in clay for many years. I used to just exclusively work on the wheel, and now I've transitioned into hand building. So I'm going to show you something that I use as a technique. I call it a split bowl. And I use this to make a lot of different shapes in my studio. And I'm down in my studio right now. I have already rolled out my slab over my shoulder. You can see my part of my studio, my trusty slab roller. And let's see, in the corner you can maybe see my wheel that is buried underneath all kinds of stuff because I just don't use it right now, but I can't give it away at this point. So anyway, please ask questions. I'm going to turn the camera this way so you can hopefully see what I am doing. Some technical stuff here. There we go. So I've rolled out a slab here, and I usually go between 3/4. Let me see. What do I have to go look at my settings? Sorry, guys. No, I usually go between 1/4 and 3/8 inch thick. I just think that works for me with my hand building. I work with the clay, mostly just coming fresh out of the bag. I don't let it dry. I use it soft. I do soft sculpting kinds of techniques when I make my pieces. So I've rolled this slab out. I'm going to add texture. I'm really big into texture, and I'll show you some of my tools that I mostly make myself for texture. I often look at things to press clay into, like bottoms of shoes. If you look at the bottoms of your shoes right now, you may find a really good pattern there. So I'm always asking people to see the bottoms of their shoes. So I'm going to take my rib. I tend to smooth out my clay when I begin. A lot of people do this because they don't like the texture. Whoops, sorry. I'll have to work on these skills. I apologize. People don't like to see the texture of the canvas. And I've been that way often myself. In fact, when I was throwing, I would try to get rid of all my finger marks even. That was kind of what I was taught when I first started. And as I've gotten older and gone along and gotten more experience, I tend to like leaving some of my own impressions on the clay. It makes me feel like it makes it mine, and it's an okay thing. So I have even started using some of the texture from the canvas as part of what I leave behind. Let me show you too. So what we're making today is this split bowl. It's split because I cut it in half, and what I have started doing is putting half of the texture on the inside and half on the outside. I just feel that's fun. There was a time where I was doing two different textures that would play against each other, but I've switched to having this. And you can maybe see, I don't know if the lighting's good enough in here, that I left the canvas in here, and the way the glaze works with it, I just like that. So, any questions so far? You guys can hear me okay? Good. Okay. So one of the other things I do is often I make templates, and when I'm first developing a shape or a size or something, I'll play around with the clay and I'll cut out something maybe out of newspaper and make a quick template that I'll use. But once I find the shape that I want, I tend to use manila folders. I've used other things too, but this is very bendable. It lasts forever. Well, maybe not forever, but it lasts a long time. And then I tend to write on it. You can see all kinds of little things, but I'll write what I use it for, and sometimes it's multiple different things. And this is actually, you can see that the base that I'm going to put on this bowl. And on this one, I've put a square base because I add this is a berry bowl, so I add a little drip tray that's square, so it sort of matches that. So that's why I've done that, but I've done circular ones too. In fact, I'll show you some other split bowls that I've made just before we get started. So this is a yarn bowl. I'm a knitter, and this is my yarn bowl shape. The yarn can come through this little heart, and again the pattern is on the inside and the outside, and I have a circle as the base of that one. And then here's just a regular cereal bowl, again with a circle on the bottom. So you can use this for lots of different shapes. The berry bowl is a little more, I've just developed this berry bowl with a little more openness because I feel like that way the berries kind of spread out a little more. It can dry or be washed and then just sit in here and be served, or also you can put this in the refrigerator. So that's how I market those. So come up with my circle, and I sometimes have a thing about making it as perfect as I can, but I'm pretty much over that. I'm trying to be more organic in my work these days, so I'm letting go of a lot of the rigidity that I had, especially with throwing, like leaving the finger marks, not in a bad way, but just not worrying too much about it. And when I make a pattern, I tend to work in multiples. If I'm going to roll a slab out, I like to get as much as I can out of it. So I'm going to take this. Let's see if I can get, so you guys can see. Let me find a better thing. Use my coffee cup, sorry. Again, I'll get better with this technical stuff. Can you guys see? Okay. So now, and this happens to me all the time, I lose my needle tool. I use a needle when I cut out. I have all kinds of cutting shapes, cutting implements, cutting tools. I have a knife. I have all kinds of other needle tools. This really little thin one, which is a Kemper, I like because it makes kind of a thin mark. And just the way I hold it, I find this easier than holding this and going around curves, because I tend to have a lot of curves when I'm cutting things out. So I choose a needle tool. It leaves little goobers around, but you can get rid of those. So I'm going to cut out a couple of these, and I'll make a couple of them just to show you what I do. So I'm just using my tool, just here, and I'm cutting around. Then, because this is the manila folder, I can cut it in half, or just fold it in half, not cut it in half, and I make another cut right down the middle, and there's my split in the bowl. So I'm going to do that I'm going to try to make 4 of these today, just to show you a couple times, and it's just sort of how I work. Once I have the technique down, I'm pretty good about being able to do it in production. Does anybody have any questions? Where are you guys looking in from? Tell me what areas of the country you're in, or the world. Cool, London. Frederick, right nearby. South Africa, wonderful. How fun. North Carolina, San Diego, wonderful. Thanks for getting up early. Montreal, boy, I'll tell you, I am new, as you can tell, new to Periscope, and I've just begun watching, and I'm really enjoying watching as much as I think I'm going to enjoy participating. So, okay, so I've cut these out. I'm going to put my template aside. I don't know the diameter of this. I couldn't tell you. Let's see if I have oh, I do have a ruler. Just to give you a size idea. So it's about 9 inches in diameter, just so you know what I'm starting with. So once I've cut out, I just put the scrap clay aside. I recycle. One thing I like about hand building is that when you trim, when you're throwing and you get the scraps all over the place, it gets really dusty. Not that my studio isn't dusty, it surely is, but this way I can control the dust a little more. I put this in a plastic bag and I'll wedge it up and I'll reuse it. I might add water if it's a little dry, but it's very easy to recycle constantly so I don't get a big bucket of clay. So I'm going to put that aside. And now, let's see. I want to make sure. Can you guys see what I'm working on? I'm going to have to get a tripod here. Let me position this so. There we go. Can you still see? I think that's better. Okay. So I've got my pieces and we'll just start with the first one. So I take half. You can, I don't know if you can see, the grain on that is from, there's a smooth side where I wiped it with the rib, and then the other side has a little texture. I tend to, if I'm doing a lot of stamping, I'll stamp the smooth side where I have used the rib. So I have all kinds of tools that I use for texture. As you see, these are made of clay. Some I've pushed into something. This one I made a bunch of circles. These are rollers, which are fun. So I'll use this one first, but I'll try to use a couple of them. So I start with the first side that I'm going to have, and I start texturing it. With this, I tend to go towards the middle. I don't mind pushing out the middle because it creates a little bit of a lip where I'm going to attach the other split. And I'm not worrying, you'll see, I'm not worrying about distorting the shape. So that creates this. And the way that I glaze, I use 2 different colors. I use an underglaze with a glaze on top. So it just the more texture I have, it catches the light and dark of the different color and the glaze, and I really like that. So I've textured this one side. Now I'm going to flip it over, and here's where it gets fun. So I'm going to score the little middle part. I tend to use this little scoring tool. Again, we all have our own little favorites, but this is what I use. I use slip just a little bit. This clay, because it's pretty fresh and new, it tends to adhere, but that's my backup. I'll slip and score the same side, the back side, so it's the rough side is what I'm scoring on this side, and I lay it down on top. Now it doesn't match up, that's okay. And so the smooth side, the ribbed side is up. So there I go. See that? Can you see? And now, again, I'm going to go with the same roller and roll to the middle. And that seals it. So again, it's kind of smushing it in, and I kind of give a little extra press when I go into the middle. And if I'm missing questions, I apologize. I tend to look down a lot. Okay, so now on this side, I've got texture, and on this side, I've got texture. But it's a little distorted, so what I do, again, this is why it's nice to have the template, is I put the template back on just in a rough way, And where it's gotten kind of distorted is kind of on the edges. The sides don't seem to, but the edges do. So I just cut that away, and now I'm back to my nice circle. So then that's when I clean the edge a little. I just use a sponge and water. Just lightly. I might wipe in there, and I often, when I'm really thinking about it, I'll use a tool like a rubber edge and just make the seam. I'm okay about seeing the seams as someone who used to sew long ago. I like that. I mean, again, that's part of the process. There are little goobers around. I try to get that off. So I just smooth that one more time. Go like that. Another thing that I'll use to actually emphasize the seam is one of these little things, or even, let's see if I can find, and one of the actual sewing marking tools. You guys have seen that. This has nice big stitches, so if I remember it, this is the key. If I remember it, I'll do it now. So since I'm talking about it, I'll remember it. And again, that just emphasizes the seam. And I do it on the other side too. And it creates a nice little pocket for the glaze to go under. All right. Then, to make the bowl shape, I have various slumping tools that I use. It usually starts with some sort of ball shape. Here, let me hold this up so you guys can see. And I have a basket filled with all kinds of shapes of balls. The thing about using a ball on its own is there's usually some texture on it. So if you don't like that, and I don't always like adding another layer of texture that I didn't plan on, I've made these ones out of clay and then just bisque them and I use them. So because I want this to be nice and open, I'm going to use this kind of wide shape. I tend to choose, I don't know if you can see, but because I textured one side, I textured this side and then I flipped it over and then textured the other side. This side, some of the little texture that I had created the first time goes away. So I tend to put that on the outside and leave the one that's a little more clean showing the texture on the inside. It's total choice. So this is what I do. I just take the shape and just sort of keep patting it down and turning, and it forms into the bowl. And I don't mind the edge being all wobbly. There was a time where I would have hated that. I wanted it to be perfect. But again, I'm trying to be more organic, so I'm going back into letting it be kind of uneven. And again, it just shows how it was created. It's not awful, but anyway, it's certainly not just one straight edge. So I'm going to do one more texture and then I'll show you how I put I'll let this set up just a little bit, but you can see, I'll turn it upside down. It's, you know, it needs to set up a little more for me to just let it sit out and start drying. So I'm going to let it set up a teeny bit on here and I'll show you some of my other texture tools that I use. I'll do it again. Does anybody have questions? You can still hear me? Everything okay out there? Okay. So here we go. I'm going to do this again. And here's another one of my, I think tend to have favorites. There's another one of my favorite stamps. Pretty simple. It's just the back end of a bamboo brush pushed into the clay. But it makes really nice mark on the clay. And again, it works pretty well. So I'm just pressing. Not worrying about distorting. It can be very random. Whoops, you guys are falling. Sorry. I'm going to have to get my technical skills better. There. So that's that. So again, I'm going to turn it over so that pattern is face down. I have to find my tools for scoring. I'm always looking for my tools. Score, slip, score. I mean, I don't go too crazy with the scoring and slipping because I'm pressing it pretty nicely together. I don't have a problem with the seams coming apart. Okay, place it down again. It's not exactly fitting. I mean, I push it a little bit just to make sure there's an overlap. Let me show you. You know, there's an overlap there. Okay, so take this. And I tend to start at the seam to seal it, and I'm pushing, I'm rocking it a bit. And that's the part that I'm telling you just gets a little distorted with the pattern, but I don't mind because that'll go on the outside. So then let's do the rest of it. Wipe away a little of the moisture. Do a quick, you could use the back end of a brush here too. I mean, I've done that, just a little pointed end. You don't have to have anything special, but we all love our tools. Go back on this side. Oh, this time, well, I'll use this one this time just to show you a difference. Move this. Just a smaller little stitch. And on this side. And then take my pattern. I try to line up the bend somewhere in the middle there, just to keep the circle shape. Cut away the little bit, not as much this time, excess, not as much distortion. Okay, clean the edge. And I tend to use pretty dry sponge. I didn't dip this in water again. I might clean it up when it's drying some too, if there's a little bit of a sharpness to it. And now I'm going to slump this on top. I'm putting the part that was a little distorted on the outside. I start at the middle, just to, again, press down so it doesn't split apart. And just keep turning. And this doesn't tend to distort the pattern, really. So, okay, I'm going to switch now and just show you what I do for the bottom, just so you can see a finished piece. So the bottom that I use on this, can you see, is thicker than the edge of the bowl. This is about 1.5 inches on my slab roller. It gets pressed down a little bit, so, and a little distorted, that's why it may not look like quite that big now, but when I roll out the slab, that's what I do. So Let me go grab that slab. So you can see this is a lot thicker. And I rolled these out last night. Just covered them in plastic. So same thing, when it's the basic slab, I use my rib to smooth it out. Lots of different directions. I'm not seeing any comments, so I'm just wondering, are you guys commenting or just watching, or is it me missing anything? Just let me know. Okay, so I use cookie cutters to make the base. And these are kind of dirty, so I'm just going to clean these up real quick. It's easier. You could make a template too, or just of what you want. And I think I showed you, just so I remember when I come back to a shape, I draw the template here so that I can remember which one I used. If I remember to do that. But if I'm being good, I'll remember that. Okay, so I'm just taking my cookie cutter and pressing down. And then taking out, so since I have two, I'll make two. Put the rest aside for now. And then I use a smaller, similar shaped one, and I would do this with circles as well as the squares. Smaller one, just eyeball it, cut out the middle. So that's what you end up with. And I can add these at this stage, even though these haven't set up. Sometimes I'll wait a little bit and have the bowls set up, but if I can have them, if I have them on this mold, I can push down on it and not distort the shape, and then it sort of all dries together. So that's what I'm going to show you today. So here's this, and I start by placing the base just on top and eyeballing. But what I've learned to do is I take a quick tape measure just to make sure that it's in the middle. So I just take a flexible one and I start on one edge and I just mark it with my finger. I turn to the opposite side and I need to move it a little. That's all. It's eyeballing, it's finagling, it's not rocket science. And same thing on the other side. And then I just sort of double check that it's all kind of even. And it may not even look even just because of how the piece is placed on your slump mold. So that's why I use the tape. Then I use this little tool. Oh, what clay am I using? Thank you. I'm Steve and Barb. I am not seeing the, I don't know why. Maybe, let me turn this way. Maybe I can see the, let's see if that works. I have not seen any of the comments, so I'm sorry. So I am using low fire clay. I use Laguna Miller 100 now. I used standard for a long time, and then I started having terrible problems. I have not tried cutting through plastic. I just saw that this morning. I just saw that example this morning. It makes me think of trying that. And with the stamping, with the lino plates and that sort of thing. So there's so many techniques out there and so many ways we can all do things. It's fun to share, and I'm sure many of you feel like me, your wheels start spinning and you could make 100 different things. So yes, it's on my list now to think about trying to use plastic. I probably missed 100 questions. So what other questions? Now I can see the questions. So if you guys have other ones. So I used low fire clay, low fire glazes at this point. I used to do stoneware, but I really like color. So you could see in this example that it's bright orange. After the clay is dry a bit, I put underglaze, and then I bisque with the underglaze on top, and then I do a glaze firing with an opalescent glaze, and they're both Amico. We use Amico products at this point. And so it's Laguna clay is what I'm using now. It's white. It does not have grog in it. I add grog, my own grog. I do a lot of pieces that are made for the garden and outdoor use, so I put grog in those pieces. I fired bisque to cone 04, and I glaze fire to 05. So, okay, so with this, the way I mark it, so I have to slip and score this. So I make on the inside just a little square. See that? And then I do score on the outside of that. Okay. And then I score the bottom. Since there's already slip there, I don't tend to slip necessarily both sides. And I just kind of press this in. Now because it's curved, it tends to, see, it goes down there, which is okay. What I do is I take the back of this little handy dandy and I tap it down. First of all, that helps sort of seal it down there. It smushes it on there. And I'll kind of clean up the excess spillage. And then the other way that I seal this is I use another one of my rollers. I have used this one too. It makes a pattern along the edge here and it just seals it down. So I kind of angle it a little bit towards the base and I just push. It just adds a little element. You see, I am not afraid of texture. I mean, I'd probably overdo. It's hard to stop once you get going. And I'll clean up with a dry brush, a dryish brush, the inside, where just some of the slip has spilled out. And then I'll use this tool again, just to seal. And it just helps so it doesn't split apart. Tap it down again. And then what I tend to do at this point is I'll flip it just to kind of see. Yeah, everything's okay. I will let it dry. See, I mean, it might slump a little out of shape if I let it just go here. So I tend to let it dry a little here. Now, because this is a berry bowl, and these holes, I'll show you what I do. And I can do this at this stage. This is no problem. With this, I've learned to do it with the back side facing me because I've got this square. What I do is I cut a hole in each corner, and this is one of my good hole cutters. I can't remember where I got these, but I've got the ones with the little points too. So I do one in each corner. See? And then I just do one right in the middle. Then, just to add a little more, and it ended up just sort of by accident. I like the way it looks. Get some of that clay out of there. As I do one on the outside edge in line with the middle one. So it looks like that. And then what it looks like on the inside is that? Any questions? Okay, I'll do one more of the bottom and cutting the holes, and then I think it'll be good. So here's my square I cut out. And this is how I tend to work. Oh, you probably get, I mean, I just get stuff kind of all over the place, but I work on being a little bit more of a neat potter, but I'm just not. Okay, so my tape. So I just kind of move it down, measure, measure. And then one last time just to make sure I've done it. And then I mark. I will get better at this after my first broadcast. I promise I'll start to figure out how I can respond better and see the questions. I tried to use my iPad, but that was not working, so I'm not sure with the microphone, so I have to figure that out. Maybe my iPad, I thought my iPad had a microphone, but maybe not. Okay, so I just slipped and scored and just pressed it down. Pound it a little just to seal it. I could even, when it distorts it a little, it's okay. I'll use this one. Even though it's a little big, you'll see just the difference that makes. And it sort of will pick up what's on the design of this. See, lines. I make these in lots of different ways. Maybe one thing I'll do one day is show how I make some of my texture tools, which I learned from another, the rolling ones I learned from a potter named Amy Sanders in North Carolina, who was a fabulous teacher and is a wonderful clay artist as well. And I think that's the thing, is sharing our techniques, our ideas. Goes a long way. And I think it's also, what I'm trying to do as well is invite people that aren't necessarily practicing clay to view and watch these, because then they get an appreciation for how the process works and that sort of thing. So now I'm going to cut my holes in all the corners. In the middle, on the sides, there you go. Okay, well, I think that's probably pretty good for a first broadcast. Anybody have any other questions at the moment? And I'll try to do another one soon and plan something out. Anything else people would like to see? All right, well, I'm going to sign off for now. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Laura. I have a website called ClayByLaura. I write a weekly blog about my experiences in the studio during the week and that sort of stuff. So check that out if you want, www.claybylaura.com. And yes, right now I can see your questions, but I don't know why I wasn't able to before, if it was the way the camera was tipped. So I'm really sorry that I didn't. If you have questions, email them to me, or I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. I am on Instagram or through my website or ClayByLaura@gmail. Happy to answer anything. Or if you watch this again and have questions, or if I see something when I don't know if you see the questions when you replay this, but anyway, I'm a newbie. I'll get better at it, I promise. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see ya. Bye.